Good morning. I'm still drinking out of a Christmas mug. I think I'll leave it around for a while. But we're already on day 2 of the new year. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh. This year is already flying by and it just started. Well, join me. I'm going to go ahead and read John chapter 2. Now, I haven't read it in a while. I've read it plenty of times before, but I'm going to go fresh at it. Each day I read this, I'm going to read it like I have new eyes. So I'm going to sit down and start reading. I didn't realize that chapter 2 was turning the water into wine already. We already fast forwarded past Jesus's childhood, and John actually kind of zooms right from him being kind of at the beginning, with creation. And then he jumps right into John the Baptist declaring that he is the Christ. And then he jumps right into him being an adult and him helping his mom when a wedding they were attending ran out of wine. So we kind of jumped from Genesis to suddenly the New Testament to now he's an adult. And I think that is because John's purpose for writing this is different than like Matthew and Luke. They actually lay it out and do a little bit more of his childhood and kind of set him up for being in ministry. John goes right to the point. He's like, I got more important things to tell you. We got to fast forward. And so, Jesus grew up as a normal child. However, I wonder if he was able to do miracles as a child. I would think so. Like maybe if a bird died, a pet bird or a bird, I wonder if he brought it back to life. And I wonder if his mom saw him do that many, many times, but he wasn't ready, you can tell, to make his ministry public. because it says in verse 4, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." I think he wasn't ready to become public with his miracles yet. Or was his mom actually just wanting him to help her? Like, did she just want him to, like, she just turned to him like, "Help, can you run to the other town and get some wine? What can you do?" Or did she know, hey, he can do some pretty amazing things? That's an interesting thing to ponder. And when he says, "My hour has not yet come," that's interesting. It's like he's not quite ready to let everybody know that he is the Messiah, but he's right on the brink of it. But it's interesting that he took time to go to a wedding, to help his mom, and even kind of, even Jesus himself went ahead and did something ahead of his own schedule because he wanted to, take care of his mom. I think that's pretty cool. Then he actually fills the jars, or he tells the servants to fill the jars with water. And it says, so they filled it to the brim. That kind of stood out to me because I was thinking, when Jesus asked you to do something, don't just kind of do it. Like, they filled it to the brim. They didn't just fill it 3/4 and go, "There, that's full, that's full, that's full." They filled it all the way up. They not only did what Jesus asked them, but they went all the way, even probably past of what he would have assumed that they would have filled it up, which is more to carry. So that's probably a lot of water. I know I've seen it, that there are these gigantic, I've seen them, they're all made out of stone, and they're huge, kind of like what we would have maybe in a garden. That's how big they were. And there's another little thing that I knew from before searching this out, is that in the Jewish culture, they were one of the only people to make these vessels out of stone. They would carve them out of stone. And the reason is because they had this thing with cleanliness. It was in their Old Testament laws. And pottery, if it became defiled or dirty, or touched whatever, like a dead carcass, or there were all these laws, or like maybe somebody who was unclean, could be a woman on her period, or it could be someone who had leprosy, or it could be, but if something got defiled, they had to go and smash the pottery and get rid of it. But a stone vessel, I think there's like a loophole that for stone vessels, they don't have to be treated as well because they don't hold the germs. Something like that. You'll have to do some research if you want to see that. But the really neat thing is, there is a video, maybe I could find it and link it in the description, from Sergio and Rhoda in Israel. And there's a new archaeological dig. They were going to put a road through this area, and when they started to dig for the road, they found an archaeological kind of dig where it was an old, where they would make these stone pots, where they would cut them out of the earth, and then they actually have a bunch of these different kinds of pots and mugs and stuff like that, kind of in production mode. Like maybe the ones that something broke off of them, so they tossed them aside and started over. And I'll put that in the description because that was really good. And it showed that where you find these stone pots is guaranteed that it's going to be a Jewish settlement, because of this information that other nations did not use the stone pots like the Jewish people did, which is really cool. So they would have been these giant stone pots. When when I was done reading, I also read my little commentary here in the Life Application. And for 2:5, verse 5, Mary submitted to Jesus' way of doing things. She recognized that Jesus was more than her human son. He was the Son of God. When we bring our problems to Christ, we may think we know how he should take care of them, but he may have a completely different plan. Like Mary, we should submit and allow him to deal with the problem as he sees best. And I need to get my glasses before I read more of these tiny prints. Or maybe I've lost my glasses. Oh, there they are. So I thought that was funny because, I don't know, is it just me? But I have a tendency when, I like that sentence where it says, when we bring our problems to Christ, we may think we know how he should take care of them. Yeah, I have a tendency to say, help, Jesus, I need this, and let me show you how to do it. Maybe that's just me. But Mary, obviously. Okay, and then after the story about the weddings, it says they went to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and they stayed for a few days. So what we see in the next verse in 13 is that they were headed to Jerusalem. They were kind of moving towards Jerusalem. So they stayed in Capernaum for a little bit, and then they went to the Jewish Passover in Jerusalem. So Passover is what we consider like around Easter time, and it's also where the time of year that Jesus actually was crucified at Passover. And it was also known, if you kind of research in the Old Testament, which now that I've been doing a lot in the Old Testament, it's been really good to now read the New Testament with the Old Testament in mind. It's one of the, what they call it, pilgrimage festivals. So all the Jewish men over a certain age were required for certain festivals to travel to Jerusalem to celebrate. So a lot of people would, all the families would go to Jerusalem and celebrate, so they could all be by the temple and they can all, celebrate together. So that's where they're headed. But this little note that my Bible puts right before we enter into verse 13, I thought was really interesting. Because remember yesterday we were talking about the different names of Jesus, or the different things he calls himself. This little note says, John stresses the deity of Christ. He gives us 8 miracles that serve as a sign that Jesus is the Messiah. In this section, he records Jesus describing himself as the bread of life, the water of life, the light of the world, the gate, and the good shepherd. So this passage coming up, he's going to say all of those things. I don't know if it's also coming up here after chapter 2, so let me look and see what he does. So it says, John provides teachings of Jesus found nowhere else. This is the most theological of the 4 Gospels. So John takes his stories and he puts them in a certain order, and he also presents the ones that he wants us to see to show that Jesus is God. He's showing God, Jesus' deity, which means that he's holy, the deity of Christ. So coming up, it's basically giving us a note that we need to watch for the miracles. So his first miracle, of course, was turning the water into wine. But in the chapters coming up, there's going to be some more miracles. And it says that there are 8 miracles. So watch for those as we go to read and number them. Like this is miracle number 1. So there's 8 miracles. And we're also, as we read through here, we're going to come up to the 7 I am statements as well. So, okay, so let's go to verse 13. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So Jesus is really upset because his Father's house, the temple, and even before the temple was the tent of meeting, or the tabernacle. It was set up as a place that his people could come and meet with God. Before Jesus, they had to do like a set of sacrifices for their sins so they could come into the presence of God. And actually the priest was the only one that officially got to come into the presence of God. But they got to come near and celebrate and worship their God. And for God, you can always see he's a very relationship. His character, he loves relationship. And so here Jesus comes into the courts, and this is supposed to be a place where people come to meet with his Father and him, and he can have a relationship with them. And they've turned it into a place where they're actually making money. They are kind of stealing money from people, because say you traveled a long way, you were supposed to come with a sacrifice. And if you couldn't come all that way, you might want to actually buy like a sheep or whatever you needed for that sacrifice. So they had those available, which would be a good, courteous thing to do, but they were kind of upselling them, or charging them way too much. They were charging them way more than they were worth. So they were basically, swindling people out of money. And a lot of these people were poor. And God has a lot of compassion on the poor. And he even, in all of his sacrifices and stuff, if you read through the Old Testament, he makes provisions for, here's what I need you to do. You come into, you do this sacrifice for me to cleanse your sins and stuff like that. But if you don't have money, you're poor, instead of having, a sheep or a goat or a cow, you can have 2 turtle doves, because they were easy. You could get them for like a penny a piece or something like that. So people selling and taking advantage of people in God's house, in his area where they're supposed to be coming to worship him, this breaks God's heart, and this makes him angry. And so you can see that's why he is so upset, is because this was supposed to be a place where they met him, and they basically turned it into a marketplace, which is no good. We see that today. I mean, think about the history of the Catholic Church and how they started selling, is it called penance or something? Like, if they said, well, you've sinned, you could actually buy or do certain things so that the priest would give you your sins free, or what am I trying to say? You could get your sins forgiven, man's version of it, if you paid so much money. It's like every time God sets out and builds a church, man comes in, humans come in, and they make it for their own profit. And think about all the TV evangelists. That is maddening. It's maddening to me, because it's one thing to sell people stuff and take their money. It's another thing to pretend like you are talking straight from God. It's another thing to represent God and then take people's money. That's just really, really bad. So you can see Jesus is pretty upset. And then he gets into an argument with the Jews, which I think are the Pharisees and stuff. It says, the Jews then responded, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?" So they're kind of mad at him because he's basically taking away their ability to make money. And he tells them, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it up again in 3 days." They're confused by that because he's talking about his own body being the temple. That they're going to kill him and he's going to raise it up in 3 days. But they're looking at, just like we all do, at physical, tangible things here on earth. Boy, we as humans really hang on to stuff here on earth, don't we? Oh, will anybody get it? Huh? He says, it says in verse 21, "But the temple he had spoken about was his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples recalled what he had said." Of course, they all are like, hindsight is 20/20 when you look back and you go, oh, that's what he meant. Okay, verse 23. "Now while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people." That's a really interesting thing. It's like everybody was so excited that he was doing miracles, and so they started kind of coming and, pawning over him and everything, but he didn't want to entrust himself because he knew all people. He already knew their hearts were horrible. He knew their hearts were hard and bad, and all they wanted was the fame or the miracles or the glory. They weren't really loving him for him. And he did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Well, you can actually write that down for your character of God. He knows what is in each person's heart. So you can't hide from God. And if someone is actually hurting you, God already knows it. He knows what's in their heart. That's why we should actually also follow him, especially if you're not married and you're thinking about getting married, or you're going to get into a business relationship with someone. You need to be really honed in to what God is saying, because he knows their hearts, even though they kind of look all polished and pretty on the outside and they're saying all the right things. He knows what their true hearts are. So I would probably write something down about his character, that he knows what's in each of our hearts. And I would also write down, which I probably am going to write down in my journal here in a little bit, that I just need to stay close to him, because he's going to lead me through and let me kind of stay away from the people that might harm me or might have an evil plan. Oh, well, that was a surprise, because I'm not reading these ahead of time. I'm not studying for them ahead of time. I'm just reading them in real time with you and just discovering what's in them. So when I opened it up, I was like, oh, I forgot that this was the Jesus turns water into wine, and with his mama. Anyways, good study today. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow for chapter 3. And it looks like Nicodemus is going to talk to him. So we'll see you tomorrow. Love you guys. Have a great day. Shalom, dear friends.